First of all, you're going to need some stretchy felt. I want to emphasize that this is not like the stiff felt you'll find at some craft stores. This has a little give to it, and that is very important. You do not want to be using stiff felt. The next thing you'll need is obviously a paper cat mask. I got mine off of Amazon. It was pretty cheap. I'll leave a link to all the materials I can in the description below. Another thing, hopefully you'll have this lying around, is a hot glue gun and hot glue sticks. You will need a lot of hot glue sticks, especially for the felting part. Then there's paintbrushes and paint, and a pair of scissors, preferably two if you're using fabric scissors, because it will ruin fabric scissors if you use them on stuff like the EVA foam or the paper masks, so keep that in mind. Braided elastic is another thing. I used the 1-inch kind. Next up on the list is EVA foam. I used, for my mask, 6mm thick, but anything around that should be okay. And certainly last but not least is something to write with. I just used a pencil, but it could be a marker. Now these next couple items are more or less optional. I would say more so the eye mesh, especially. Now for the fur, I've seen some people use yarn if you don't have access to faux fur. I don't have any experience with it, but it's definitely an option. Something I forgot to include was black fleece for lining the mask, if you want to do that. And then also, if you want to use something for the nose, instead of just painting it, I've used clay before, like oven-baked clay, and then just hot glued it on. So it's finally time to start the tutorial. The first step is to trace around where you want to cut the ears off, if you are cutting the ears off. Basically, you're going to trace that whole shape onto the EVA foam, and then cut that out, and glue it back onto the head to make it flat. You can kind of see it here, and excuse my shaky hands, please. This next step is very optional. I'm just doing this because sometimes I like more of a cartoony look on my masks. But I am using an X-Acto knife here, and I want to say, if you're a kid watching this, please get permission from an adult or help from an adult before you do this. Now we're just going to be cutting out the shape of the ears we want, and this will be different for everyone, especially for all I know you could be not making a cat mask, you could be making a dog or a raccoon, I'm not sure, but essentially you'll just want to make the outline and then one side a bit longer than the other, so it's at a slight angle. It will help it lay flatter on the mask. And now when you're actually cutting them out, I recommend cutting with the scissors at an angle as well, because that will also help them lay flat on the mask. And just here's some footage of me hot gluing those ears down. You're going to need to hold them down for a while, waiting for the glue to dry, and try not to move them around too much. You want them to stay just where you want them. Up next is felting, one of the more tricky parts of making a mask. Now, before you begin hot gluing, just make sure the piece of felt actually covers the whole mask. If it doesn't, you may need to use another piece for the ears. To avoid wrinkles, you'll want to follow a pattern similar to what I'm doing here, starting at the little muzzle and then spreading out from there. A good habit to do as well is smoothing out the felt with your fingers as the hot glue is drying, because this will really help to avoid any of those wrinkles and little bumps in the felt. Coming up next, you'll see me put a lot of hot glue down, and looking back on it, this was a mistake, and I recommend you not do this, because it will be hard to smooth it all out perfectly before it all dries. And you can see here, I've got some wrinkles, which is not the best. Like, it's not a game breaker, but I'm trying to do a tutorial here, people. I can't be having wrinkles on my felt. Are you kidding me? Luckily though, most of the wrinkle was in the eyes, which I'll actually be, hiding when I cut the eye holes out. And here you'll just be gluing up to the base of the ears, and you want to let that dry fully before you go on to putting the felt onto the actual ears. Now, when you're putting the hot glue onto the foam of the ears, you'll want to avoid getting it on the sides of the foam, as that will be important in a couple of steps. So everything's finally hot glued down, and we can move on to cutting off this extra felt. I'm just showing here around where you want to cut off because you'll want to leave a bit extra to fold over the edge. And here you can see I've put some slits into the felt. That just makes it a bit easier to hot glue down when you're folding it over. So I'm just showing a small section of what you should be doing to fold over that extra felt, but you can go ahead and do that around the whole mask except for the ears, because as you'll see in this next step, we will be gluing another piece of felt onto the back of the ears. I like to glue felt onto both backs of the ears before I start cutting off the excess. It just makes it a bit more, I don't know, simple in my mind, but it's not necessary by any means. And you can see here, I'm just leaving a bit extra on the edges of the ears because now is the time where we glue those two pieces, the front and the back, together. Coming up soon in the video, you will see that I'm cutting off those little pieces that stick beyond the edge of the foam off. Just gives it a nice, sharp, clean, classy look. Alright, so here's what mine is looking like so far. Hopefully you're having some luck following along. And up next we're going to cut some slits into the eye holes. You're going to want to cut from one end of the hole in the mask to the other, both vertically and horizontally. So you end up with 4 little triangles on the back like this. And then you're just simply going to glue those down. Make sure they're kind of pressed up against the very edge of the mask because that'll give it a cleaner look. And there we go. Those are the eyes all glued down. And here you can see just what it looks like on the back. Pretty simple so far. And we're almost getting to the end because now we are moving on to painting the mesh. So first we're going to need to trace the correct shape. So first we're going to need to trace the correct shape onto the mesh. And before you cut it out, you want to leave quite a bit of extra space on the edges of that shape. As you can see here, I just cut out a big square around them. You'll also notice that eventually I start painting outside of the outline I made, and that's just because I don't want to have anyone seeing those lines, those little stripes that I have on my mesh. It's just because of the brand I use. Yours might not have those stripes, and that's probably even better. And there you can just see where you should put some hot glue down, because now you can also see why you need that extra bit of space on the mesh. And there we go. The eyes are completely done. I would have added more to them, but I didn't have many colors available in paint. I need to go to the store and pick some more up. So hopefully yours came out a bit better than mine. And here I am just tracing a little shape onto this faux fur. And hopefully you can see that little arrow that shows the direction the fur is going. Essentially, you just want the fur to be flowing away from the nose of the mask towards the edges. And here that is all glued down, and we can finally get on to painting the actual felt. So for this base color, I'm using watercolors, which is something I haven't tried before, and it worked all right, but I will say it took a long time to get that deep color. A lot of refilling the paintbrush, essentially. Here is the first base color, and you may be thinking, wow, that doesn't look really that great. And you are right, but it gets better once I put these lines on, as you can see. And I didn't record this because it was just so tricky to paint little lines at that angle I was with the camera there. So hopefully next time, if I make another tutorial, I'll get a bit better at that. And I kind of skipped over this part, but I added little strips of fur to the ears, and they're basically just little triangles that are the length of the ears, and glued them on. It adds a lot of extra dimension to your mask, and I think it's just a nice little touch. But here we are, the mask is officially done. I'm so happy with how mine came out. There's a few things I would change if I were to redo it, but hopefully you're happy with yours too. And if you are, please let me know in the comments how this tutorial worked for you, how your masks came out. I would love to hear about them. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video.